All right. Well, thank you for joining us. The Monrovia team would like you to enjoy the opportunity today as we kick things off for the next half hour or hour or so. We're inviting you to remove any distractions and immerse yourself in the thoughts and feelings of being in the garden, someplace all of us would really love to be. My name is Kathleen Hennessy, and I work with Monrovia's PR agency, Axiom Marketing. I'll be introducing our experts from Monrovia in just a bit, but first we want to cover a few details with you. We have a large group today, but you will only be seeing the presenters. Your cameras are turned off and your microphones are muted, so we can't see or hear you. But we are encouraging everyone to participate by asking questions throughout the presentation. You can do that by typing your questions into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. We will be monitoring the questions and we will have time at the end to answer a few of them live. My guess is that we might not get to all of the questions, but please ask away. We will follow up with answers in an after-party discussion. We will also have a second way that you can participate today. At the beginning of the discussion, we'll be asking you about your style. You'll have the opportunity to answer our poll question in just a bit. So let's get to know our Monrovia experts. First, I'd like you to meet Katie Tammany. Katie's official title is Chief Marketing Officer, but she really fills the role of Chief Storyteller and Trend Spotter at Monrovia. Katie has more than 20 years of expertise in lifestyle and leisure industries. She's been tracking consumer trends throughout her career. And in 2001, she became the youngest editor-in-chief of Sunset Magazine and Sunset Books in the company's history. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Sunset Magazine, it's the premier authority on lifestyle in the West. Katie is a longtime avid gardener with a specific interest in the intersections of garden, art, health, and well-being. And her favorite spring planning task is visiting her local garden center for inspiration. She loves just browsing and gathering ideas for spring planting. Hey, Katie, how are you?
I'm great. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I'd also like you to meet Georgia Clay. Georgia is the new plants manager at Monrovia, which means she's our go-to expert for everything plants. In her role, she works with breeders and plant finders from around the world to bring new plants to market for Monrovia. She is a true plant trend finder, trialing and testing varieties that we as consumers may not see on the market for many years. Georgia also heads up the sustainability initiatives at Monrovia with a special emphasis on climate appropriate plants, sustainable packaging, and growing methods. Georgia's favorite part of spring planning involves looking at old pictures of her garden. She uses these photos as a tool to see which plants might need a little refresh this season. Hi, Georgia.
Hi, Kathleen.
So again, thank you to everyone for joining us today. We have some inspiring ideas and wonderful plants to share. So Katie, I will hand it off to you.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen, and good morning, everyone. So we're going to be talking about how to figure out your garden style and the plants that will help you express that. But to start with, I thought we would take a little quiz together. So when you visit a garden center, what type of person are you? Are you a kid in a candy store? You walk into the garden center and everything looks fantastic. You start filling your cart immediately. You'll figure out where to put that plant when you get home. Or are you efficient, if a little predictable? You always go to the same part of the garden center, whether it's shade lovers or perennials, you kind of know what works in your garden, so you're in and out quickly. But when you get home, sometimes you look at what you bought and it's pretty much what you already have, and you're not really bringing anything new into the garden, and you've started looking at your neighbor's yard thinking, why can't I do something like that? Or finally, are you just a little bit overwhelmed? You can't really put anything in your cart because every decision seems a little too loaded, and you're not sure if that 1 gallon perennial is really going to fit into the rest of your garden look. So you're just kind of paralyzed. So we're going to introduce a little poll right now that Kathleen's going to put up on the screen, I think. Yes?
Yeah, we have it up actually. So,
Oh,
we've had quite a few people answering already, almost everybody. And it looks like I've got some kindred spirits in attendance today. Everybody, the majority right now at almost 70% are saying that they're kids in a candy store. And I can relate to that.
that's great to hear. I can definitely relate to that. And while there's nothing wrong with that feeling, sometimes it can be challenging to actually put together a cohesive look in the garden when you feel like that. And so one of the goals that we hope for today is that you're going to leave with a sense of, all right, I've got a kind of better roadmap of what will really fit my taste, the mood I'm trying to create, and it'll help you shop a bit better as we get into spring. So to start with, I wanted to talk about what style is and isn't it for the purposes of this talk. We're not going to be talking about designing your landscape areas. I have on the screen right now a landscape plan, but we're not really going to get into the functional aspects of your garden, although I will say that that's something that you should first take the time to do, which is walk around your entire garden space and think about how you want to use it, how you want to use different sections of that space, kind of map it out in your mind that this is over time what you're going toward, whether that's a place in your garden just for yourself, a peaceful retreat, or you have an entertaining area, or you want a space that you really want to focus on your edible garden. Spend some time thinking about the areas of the garden that functionally that you want to have. But what we're going to talk about today is actually the mood that you're trying to set with your garden and the values that you want to express in it. For me, style really is the combination of plants and hardscape, maybe even furniture that represent your vision or communicate a feeling or value. It's where you get to be really creative. So putting functional areas aside for a moment, let's start talking and thinking about the mood that you want to create. Now, we've done a lot of assessing, trend watching, research among our audiences to spotlight 5 key styles that we think pretty much cover kind of the gamut of most gardeners today. And I want to start by talking about the first one, which is high style serenity. So if this is your style, then you respond to a more limited color palette, probably mostly greens or whites. You tend to gravitate toward hardscape that's like, tan gravel, or maybe it's a stone pathway. You're not really into brick or too much like, rock. You like things kind of clean. You like contemporary furniture, symmetry, clear lines. And you do like edibles, but you tend to like them either in raised beds, or maybe you'll have a single tree or a stretch of vine in the garden. But your style is really inspired by this idea of serenity and by really wanting to have a very elegant look. You probably are someone who wants, your outside to match your inside aesthetic, especially if you've got a sort of a clean, modern aesthetic inside. You want to carry that out outdoors. And you may be looking frequently at, home and garden magazines for inspiration. You really are thoughtful about, you're still a kid in a candy store when you go to the garden center, but maybe you're thoughtful about choosing plants in multiples. You tend to be somebody that, if you like one, you're going to buy 5. So Georgia, tell us a little bit about what plants would kind of fit high style serenity this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Katie. So evergreens play a big part in creating this high style look. And one that we really love is on the top left there is Jade Waves Chamaecyparis. Chamaecyparis is an excellent foundation plant. And this Jade Waves is a more compact version with a much more manageable size. So this is only going to be about 8 feet tall instead of the 15 plus feet that's typical of the type. That makes it a perfect choice for those modern landscapes, as you mentioned, Katie, who may have less square footage to work with. Another option that's next to that is Burley Blue Juniper. This is another great conifer for this style, more spreading type. So it creates this really beautiful blue-gray evergreen ground cover, and it's hardy to zones 3 through 8, which is awesome. This variety has a more intense icy blue color. It's able to hold on to that color a little bit better than some of the older varieties like Blue Creeper, for example. You can also add some dramatic color with something like heuchera. This one right here is Siren Song Dark Night. Beautiful, deep, dark purple foliage that looks awesome paired with those structural greens like the jade waves. This variety is great because it stays really nice and saturated and doesn't quite fade out in the summer months like some of the other varieties do. Another great dramatic foliage option is that Lilla Smokebush. This is an awesome variety. Again, much more compact version than another popular type, which is Royal Purple. Very similar, but instead of 15 feet tall like the Royal Purple is going to get, Lilla's only going to be about 4 feet tall at maximum. That form just, again, makes it much more versatile, much easier to look after and keep it looking great year after year. And then it does have brilliant shades of oranges and corals in the fall, which is always a plus. Moving to the bottom now, summer lasting crepe myrtles. Coconut is a new variety we are super excited about. The summer lasting series as a whole is some of the very best crepe myrtle breeding on the market. Coconut has this gorgeous black foliage that's really quite clean and has great disease resistance to cercospora and powdery mildew, and it looks super striking when contrasted with those crisp white flowers. This is also one of the earliest crepe myrtles to come to flower, and it has a really nice shrub-like habit. So 3 feet tall by 3 feet wide, really easy to tuck in and around your garden. We also grow this in patio tree form, so up on a standard and a ball, which makes a really awesome specimen, even container specimen in this sort of high style garden. And then for the colder zones, we do have Seaside Serenade Bar Harbor Hydrangea, another great white flowering shrub. This is an arborescens type. So large white flowers, improved sturdy stems to hold up really well in those storms and heavy rains. Zones 3 through 8, so great for those Midwest gardens. And then edibles can also have a home here too. So zestful grapes look really super stylish against a trellis or a spalliade. It can be hard to find those larger table type grapes for the home garden, but zestful grapes are just that. They're really large table grapes with a wonderful flavor. And then lastly, for this style, you can add some texture with grasses or grass-like plants. I've pointed out Lime Tuff Lamandra here, which is an awesome option for those in zone 8 through 11. True to its name, super adaptable, super tough. It thrives in both sun and shade and virtually any irrigation schedule or maybe lack of one. Great for mass planting and to add a little texture to your garden.
So Georgia, you touched on you can, have some dramatic color in this look in High Style Serenity. And I think those of you who attended our last webinar may remember that dark meets light trend. If you gravitate toward that idea, that certainly can work in the High Style Serenity garden. The other thing to keep in mind as you're shopping, we talked about greens being really important in the palette of the style. It's good to choose, like, either you're kind of interested in the gray greens and whites, or maybe you like the warmer greens mixed with whites, but pay attention to kind of which hue you're in, cool or warm, when you're choosing your greens. So next I wanted to talk about, if my cursor's moving, the next style is playful. So playful is kind of a version of cottage gardening, if you will, in that kind of more casual, loose style. But if you find yourself gravitating toward happy, warm colors, vibrant oranges, vivid purples, yellows, then this could be for you. It definitely has a wide range of colors that you can choose from, but I think playful is about being bright and happy. It's also a hallmark of the style is kind of shaggy, looser borders, things not quite in such tidy rows. And you're comfortable putting perennials and flowering shrubs together. different colors paired together. You like plants that kind of droop over the lawn space, and you're definitely somebody that might have some lawn space because you like places to nap and lounge or have the kids or dogs run around. That's part of the play that you want in your garden. I think the other essential ingredients to this style, if you're somebody that gravitates toward having artwork, sculpture in the garden, or sound, chimes is also, you know, natural part of the playful garden. You're wanting a space that's really interactive and alive. And so there's certain plants that really lend themselves to this look quite easily. And I see that George's video is off, but I think she's still there.
Yes, I'm still here. I apologize. For some reason, it's not quite working today, but I do have lots of great plants for the playful style. So agapanthus is a really awesome option for that explosion of color that you think of when in a playful garden. Purple potion is one that we really love because it has this really unique, true, vibrant purple color that's a shade that can be really hard to find in agapanthus. And purple can be such a playful color in the garden as it is. And then next to that is Canna Cleopatra, which is a super fun one to watch in the garden. This is an unstable variety, which means that you never really know quite what you're going to get in terms of flower and foliage. So
yeah, that's the magic of that plant. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, it's awesome. So you can, you know, it ranges in color in the flowers from yellow with red spots like what you see in this photo here, to pure red, to half yellow, half red, and all sorts of shades in between. And the leaves can range from green to chocolate brown. So really dynamic canna here. This one does have limited availability, but worth grabbing it if you see it in your garden center. And then next to that is Sunstar Gold Coreopsis. This is a tick seed type coreopsis, which is such a classic and looks lovely growing alongside those meadow type gardens that Katie had mentioned is critical to this style. Sunstar plants stay nice and tidy at around 2 feet tall and have really great mildew resistance for lower maintenance plants in the garden, and blooms that last from late spring all the way through summer. So a really long bloom period as well. And then grasses, of course, are a large part of those playful meadows as well for that movement and texture. And ginger love is a fantastic new fountain grass that produces these really large, beautiful golden red plumes. Gorgeous all the time, but I especially love mine, at least in my garden. My ginger loves at that time of day when the sun is hitting just right. The blooms just light up golden red and are so incredibly beautiful. And then, of course, heuchera, ever so versatile. This is the Northern Exposure series, some of the very best on the market. They're called Northern Exposure because they were bred with a hardy Canadian species, but don't let that fool you. These are fabulous in every single state. They performed well in the coldest regions of the country, all the way down to the warmest, as far south as Miami, Florida. So this is a great series all over the country, and they come in a range of beautiful colors. And then next to that is a tropical shrub, Jazzy Jewel hibiscus, pictured here as amber, but there are 3 other colors in the series as well. All produce a ton of extra large flowers that bloom consistently from head to toe, and those blooms last for up to 3 days, which is unusual for a tropical hibiscus. Usually those blooms will last just about a day. So it really does add a lot of flower power to this shrub. The foliage also provides a really nice backdrop because it's that deep, dark, glossy green. And then Katie, you mentioned loose hedges and borders, and 9-bark is a great option for that. This dark star is a brand new plant, super excited to introduce this spring. We love it for its deep, dark purple, nearly black foliage. You know, we have trialed hundreds of Physocarpus over the years, and dark star has been by far the darkest foliage we've ever seen. And it does have that really nice loose hedge appeal of 9-bark. And then vines also, lastly, can be super playful, especially when left to sort of meander throughout your space. Sun Villa Giant Red is a really impressive plant that is just able to pump out a ton of blooms throughout the season. It does a wonderful job of holding on to that vibrant red color. Even throughout the summer heat, it still stays nice and saturated. Really quite vigorous climber with those extra large flowers. Looks great if you're in a warmer zone in the garden or in a container, or if you're in a colder region, used as an annual, and containers are beautiful as well.
There's so many plants in this mix, Georgia, that just have happy faces. I think that that's part of the playful, style. As I think of it that way, is that when you're drawn to plants with that happy face at the garden center, you might want to think about how to introduce even more play in your garden. And your point about, or both of us made the point in different ways about sort of looser, larger foliage for our shrubs and hedges. That's a way to carry that playful aesthetic beyond the happy flowers, to carry it through the rest of your garden. So want to talk next about another kind of variation of this casual look and kind of cottage looking, but it's different, and that is the soulful style. So the soulful style also uses a lot of color and lush foliage, but you tend to gravitate toward nostalgia plants, roses, wisteria, lilac, hydrangea, things with, maybe call it a little more flounce, if you will. You also love fragrance in the garden and romance, and putting a palette together with plants that kiss but don't tackle each other. Everything's kind of touching, and plants are kind of getting out of their border a little bit, and you're fine with that. And you really love nurturing plants that have meaning to you. Maybe it's something that reminds you of your childhood, or a plant that your grandmother used to garden, and so you want to bring that meaning into your garden. And I think anytime you choose plants with personal meaning to you, you're on the right path. But in the soulful garden aesthetic, the key principle is to combine, if you've got different kinds of flowering plants, it's good in a section of the garden to keep it in the same hue or tone, whether that's pastels, or you do want, vibrant reds and purples. Choose plants that, kind of marry well with similar flowering hues, and then contrast that with different foliage types. You might remember in our previous trends webinar, we talked about the dressed up bohemian look that could apply to the soulful garden as well. And then in terms of specific plants, Georgia, want to take us through what you have in mind for the spring?
Yeah, of course. So, lavender comes to mind for these nostalgia plants with a lot of fragrance, great for cut flowers. So I chose Aromatico Blue Improved, which is a newer variety of lavender. I really love this particular variety. It does bloom earlier than most other English lavenders. So you do get an extended season, and it also blooms really heavily throughout the season. So there's always a ton of blooms on here. You can go ahead and cut some without feeling too bad about it. I've also noticed that it tends to stay a little bit more tidy in the garden, so a bit tighter, not so leggy and open. And then Little Darling is a lilac, a modern take on this classic plant full of fragrance and nostalgia. Again, lilacs can often get large and leggy as well in the landscape. And Little Darling stays compact, so it's only 4 feet tall at maximum, with this really beautiful structure. Because it's more compact, it allows you to plant it closer in, so you can plant it closer to your patios and closer to your paths, where you can really enjoy the fantastic fragrance of the flowers. You will get a heavy bloom set in the spring with Little Darling, and then you'll also get another lighter bloom in the summer, which is great for repeat bloom lilacs. There's not a lot of those on the market. And then another classic is Rose of Sharon, of course, our Chateau series, which produces buds and blooms up and down the stem, just about at every internode. And what that does, having buds at every internode, it greatly increases the bloom quantity and the blooming period, which allows you to enjoy the flowers over a longer season. These plants have a really beautiful vase-shaped habit with foliage all the way down to the base, so you don't get that woody stem look on the bottom, getting about 6 feet tall in total. And then next to that is forsythia, one of the most exciting shrubs, especially this time of the year, because the buds are starting to swell and it's about to be one of the first things in the garden to bloom, telling us that spring is right around the corner. Forsythia is another one that can get rather large in the garden, but spring shine stays about 2 feet tall, making it really easy to tuck into lots of different spaces. It does stay short, but it flowers exceptionally well. So it totally covers itself in blooms early spring, top to bottom, in those rich golden yellow flowers you can see in that photo. And then on the bottom here, roses. Roses are one of those plants that have a bad rep for being a little finicky, a little bit hard, but they really don't have to be. Varieties like this nitty gritty peach can make them really quite easy. They have beautiful, vivid, highly saturated flowers that are going to self-clean and repeat bloom throughout the season. They have glossy foliage that's highly disease resistant. So think like black spot and mildews. That's something that we've tested extensively throughout the country, even in South Georgia, where that disease pressure is extremely high. These have done beautifully. This is a ground cover type rose, meaning it's going to be about 3 feet tall by 4 feet wide or so. And then Seaside Serenade Newport, a truly fantastic hydrangea, not only because of that beautiful deep purple color, but because of its breeding. So this is a tetraploid, which may sound scary, but it's not. No lab coats here. It's all just natural breeding. Anyways, because they are tetraploid, they have some super cool characteristics. One is that the stems are really quite thick, which keeps the plant tidy and upright without flopping. It also thickens the cuticles of both the leaf and the flower, which means that the foliage is less susceptible to tattering in high winds in the garden. It also means the plant doesn't wilt as bad during those hot summer days, so it stays nice and full. Also, because the flower is thicker and waxier, it lasts for up to 3 months on the plant and 2 to 3 times longer than a typical garden hydrangea when used as a cut flower. This is a repeat bloomer as well, so blooming on both old and new wood. I love this hydrangea. I think it just really adds something really unique and special to the market. And then, of course, incorporating evergreens into any garden is important. So something like Golden Duke Eastern Hemlock, which is a gorgeous pyramidal shaped conifer with arching, bright golden yellow branches, good sun tolerance, great for adding a little texture and glow to the landscape. And then annuals can also be incorporated. So I've chosen here Sunbelievable Brown-Eyed Girl, which is an awesome flowering machine, produces flowers from spring through frost. Typical sunflowers are going to go straight up and flower once, really large, but be done. And this Unbelievable is more of a mounding type, which produces hundreds of flowers, maybe thousands of flowers throughout the growing year. And they're seedless and pollenless, which is the reason why they keep on producing flowers. It also makes them great for cutting. You don't get the pollen on the table problem. They're awesome in containers and in the landscape, full sun, drought tolerance, and I think perhaps best of all, there's no need to deadhead.
And it's great, actually, a few of these plants you were emphasizing, they're great for cut flowers. And, you know, I think about the Newport hydrangea, especially how well that just stands up for a long period of time, even when you bring it indoors. And one of the hallmarks of that soulful garden style, as you're at the garden center, you know, shopping, be thinking about that. Like, how often are you wanting to go out to the garden and gather flowers to create indoor bouquets? And so that might tilt you a little bit more into the soulful style in your choices. So fourth in our style roundup is what we call outdoor living and entertaining. Now that's a huge category, right? But in this style sense, what we mean is that your plantings that you choose are not it's not your focal point. Your main purpose for being outside and enjoying the outdoors is the entertaining you get to do there, the outdoor living. So you spend a lot of time on your furniture and your patio, but you really want that green backdrop. So maybe you want to choose green walls for privacy, but when you're making your choices, you're somebody that gravitates toward evergreens for year-round beauty. You want easy care. That is your top priority. And you probably, again, are drawn to a more neutral palette because in a sense, that's just going to be easier to execute well. But that doesn't mean that you can't do something special with this look. And Georgia's going to highlight some key plants that are easy care and allow for year-round beauty, but they also have something a little more special.
Yeah, so first up, when I think of entertaining friends and family outdoors, I like to have a little bit of privacy. And so upstanding emerald arborvitae is an awesome option for this sort of style that allows you to blend your fence lines and add a little bit of privacy while you do it. It's a fast growing hedge, nice, dense, upright grower. So going to be about 15 feet tall with that deep emerald green foliage. So great living fence for your backdrop. And then that lush foliage in containers can also be a key part of this entertainment style. So something like this winged phoenix hardy schefflera could play well here. Adds beautiful texture and movement to the shade garden, great for the courtyard or shady patio. This is a Taiwaniana species, which is one of the hardiest at zone 7, though this would work really beautifully overwintered as a houseplant in your cooler regions as well. And then speaking of houseplants, traditional houseplants like Monstera also work well in this style. But we are offering a fantastic lineup of larger houseplants that give you an instant, beautiful, super full container, perfect for entertaining. I'm highlighting Monstera, but you can really choose whichever one fits your personal style. I also really love keeping houseplants outside during the summer months because it's a great way to keep them really healthy and thriving while creating this lush, inviting atmosphere for outdoor entertaining. And then, of course, also creating a lush, inviting atmosphere when moving the party indoors for the winter as well. And then River Nymph Pieris from our Enchanted Forest collection is a great example. Katie, you mentioned having a backdrop, but if you look a little closer, there's something special. And I think Pieris really does that. It's a beautiful evergreen shrub that produces these huge clusters of white flowers in late winter when not a lot else is going on. I really love the glossy foliage, the other parts of the year as well, and red new growth that emerges. So really nice foundation plant or accent plant for that year-round color. And then Little Ragu Bay Laurel, which is the edible sweet bay, the kind you use to flavor your soups and your sauces. Little Ragu is a nice smaller version of that shrub with deep green foliage and beautiful red stems, really unique evergreen hedge, pretty fragrant as well. You can also trim this and keep it smaller and use it in containers as well. And then Pink Candy Hebe, another great plant that looks awesome all season long. Very deep, dark, glossy foliage with red detail in the midribs and margins. And it develops this really beautiful bronzy red winter color. The summer does give you these extra large 4-inch long flowers that are going to be this hint of blush pink, really quite beautiful. Hebes are nice coastal plants as well with really good heat resistance. And then Double Diamond Agapanthus is a great one that could be used on its own or in mass in this sort of style. They produce a ton of double to semi-double flowers in the summer. They rarely set seed, which means it's going to put all of its energy into producing flowers. So you just get a really intense, awesome display throughout the summertime, and it stays really nice and petite at about a foot tall maximum. And the last one is one of my favorites. This is Plumshine Elysium. The foliage on this plant is so outstanding. The new growth you can see in the photo emerges throughout the year and is this really intense, deep burgundy plum color. And then it ages to green. The foliage year-round is incredibly glossy and eye-catching, quite the statement in a container or the part shade garden. And it does produce spring flowers that are white and has this really pleasant, subtly spicy fragrance.
Yeah, the plum shine almost looks like you used Pledge furniture polish on it. I mean, it's pretty incredible. You know, a tip that I like to share with people that gravitate toward this style is that Pieris looks so good in a container. You can put that in a terracotta container or something, maybe that charcoal gray container, and kind of plant it and not worry about it. And it looks good all the time. And it's unique enough that people are kind of like, you know, what is that? It's not, you know, just plunking something ordinary that everybody has. It's great on a front porch. It's great around a patio. It's a real nice touch, I think. So the last style we want to talk about is earthy. Now, if this is your style, you are somebody that gravitates toward plants that do more. That's what you're looking for. Either they, you know, feed the birds and the bees, or they produce, you know, it's an edible plant, or maybe it's a plant that reminds you of a trip that you took. You're really interested in bringing in global influences. So earthy, not just about the earth and soil, but earthy, like, you know, the world. You're somebody that maybe you travel a lot and you want a garden that might reflect some of the places that you've been or places that you want to go. And so it could be that that's the main influence that you're bringing into your garden. And you'd be surprised at the plants that can marry well, no matter where they've come from. And you can put things together that might, oh, that one might look a little bit more tropical, you know, because it has large leaves, but actually it handles, you know, a dry climate really well. So you're somebody that is interested also in anything, you know, organic. You're very interested in natives, and you like to have a mix of natives as well as other, you know, cultivars in the landscape, and you really like diversity. So I think a rule of thumb in this garden is, even when you're going for diversity, it's good to pick maybe one main color that's going to be the thing that ties it all together. Maybe it's purple, as you can see here, but it could also be yellows and oranges. So if you stick with that, but then are drawn to, you know, this broad selection of plants that can do more, as I say, then your style will look cohesive. It really will. And we're going to go into 8 plants in this category, which actually it's a pretty large category of choices that you'd have, but George has selected some pretty special things for us this spring.
Yeah, so you mentioned it is a pretty large category, but you know, edibles are what I'll highlight first, which are a big part of the style. I've highlighted here Bountiful Delight, which is a blueberry. Not only does it produce these delicious berries, but it sort of does more, like you mentioned. So it fills both roles because it's an edible, but it also has a really fantastic habit and foliage, making it a nice shrub in the garden, and bonus that it produces fruit for you as well. This is a great blueberry for hot conditions. So it only needs about 300 to 500 chill hours to produce berries. And it's going to be about 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. So really nice, really great for a container specimen as well. If you want to do container edible gardening, this is a great option for that. And then moving on, vines can also be used to weave edibles into the landscape, also create privacy screens. And so Kiwi Magic is one I wanted to highlight. This is a combination. So we've combined both the male and the female vine into one container. So you don't have to worry about buying both. You'll get fruit. We do grow both the Zone 4 hardy Arguta type, which are the smaller smooth skin kiwis, as well as the traditional Chinensis, which are the Zones 7, 8 fuzzy type kiwis in this way. So Kiwi Magic in that 2-in-1 container. And then Superlicious is another edible, another great container candidate as well. It has a really beautiful compact size and thornless stems. I like to call the thornless varieties great snack track varieties, because you can plant them by your paths and walk by and not have to worry about getting poked. So Super Lucius produces wonderful large berries, really great flavor. 800 chill hours is what's officially recommended, but we are continuing to trial this and have seen good fruit production all the way down in Southern California, with just about 200 chill hours. So we still have more trialing to do, of course, but some promising stuff going on with our ongoing trials of this one. Zones 4 through 9 for that Superlicious blackberry. And then echinacea, of course, part of this is welcoming pollinators and giving a sense of life to our gardens. And echinacea do a really great job of that. I love this particular variety, Evolution Embers Sparks, because it has a really nice habit and ability to pump out the blooms without ever flopping or needing a stake, which can be kind of a bear for echinacea in the garden, and you can really enjoy the flowers this way. I also really love the yellow, super highly saturated, and I love it paired with that bright green cone. I think it is such a special color combination. And then Symphora carpus is a nice native type plant. So our new Symphony collection is a selection of Symphora carpus that we selected for their sheer abundance of berries, and that they are very large and extra bright. So a lot brighter than you would see in the traditional native type plants, and have a really beautiful, well-branched habit. Symphora carpus are great because they attract pollinators and hummingbirds when they're in flower. And then their berries are not only ornamentally beautiful, but they're attractive to birds as well. And then next to that is Santa Rita prickly pear, a super pretty hybrid with these gorgeous, soft, bluish gray pads that deepen in the cooler months to these beautiful shades of rich, dark purple. Prickly pear has fantastic drought tolerance. This particular variety has beautiful yellow flowers in late spring, early summer that give way to nice edible fruit. So you get this drought tolerance, climate appropriate plant, and also your edible all wrapped up into one. And then gaining inspiration from all parts of the world is this Heavenly Ascent Hobilia vine, a great vine for full sun. Super fragrant, large flowers with a hint that are white with this hint of purple towards the base. Absolutely stunning, a really unique plant to add a little style to this type of garden. And then lastly is the tectonic Shangri-La begonia, another very interesting specimen brought to us from India, from Dan Hinckley. It's part of our larger tectonic begonia series. This Shangri-La has fuzzy dark red stems. The foliage is really nicely deeply lobed and dark green with these really beautiful silvery white speckles throughout. Great for adding, again, texture to the shade gardens in containers and in the ground. They are hardy to zone 8, but they do overwinter nicely inside. So I use mine as a temporary houseplant for the winter, then I bring it back out in the spring and summer.
Thanks, Georgia. I think, we talked about how it's such a wide selection of possibilities under this style, under the earthy style, but you've curated here this lovely selection, a lot of different ways of thinking about berries, too, from the snowberry to actual edible, berries for us. And then thinking about, variety of foliage types too, like with the begonia or with the, vine, adding that in. But I think they all marry really well, but it's an aesthetic style that's meant to be diverse. That's the beauty of it. So don't be afraid to put a lot of different types of plants on your cart with this style. And I also wanted to say that, similar to finding your love language, you can think of this as your love language and garden style, that we probably each of us have more than one style that we respond to. But there's probably going to be one that that makes you feel the best. And that might be your main go-to, but you can add in some elements of the other styles that you find appealing. You might also find that one part of your outdoor space lends itself to a particular mood, and another part of your outdoor space might be reflective of another kind of mood. So it's okay to blend these things. I think if you blend styles, it's good to choose, again, to think about choosing a palette that's kind of consistent if you are blending different styles. And that palette could be true both in the greens that you're choosing as well as the flowers, the blooms that you're drawn to. So I think, Kathleen, that concludes our presentation, at least of the 5 styles, but I know we have a little bit of time for questions.
Yes, and we've had great questions, so thank you to everybody. If we don't get to your question live, we will gather the Monrovia experts here and get everything answered in a pre-recorded future webinar that we'll make sure that everyone has access to. So we will be answering everyone's questions. So guys, we did get a ton of them, so I'm going to just fire a few at you. First one probably for Georgia. How tall will Seaside Serenade Bar Harbor get?
So that's going to be, I believe, right around 4 feet in total. It's quite a bit more. Annabelle is a similar variety to Bar Harbor, I would say, but Bar Harbor is slightly more compact. The stems are slightly thicker as well.
Sounds good. There's another question about Seaside Serenade. Actually, this one was about Seaside Serenade and Nitty Gritty, both series. Wondering if there are white options for both those series.
There are, yeah. So Nitty Gritty, we do have Nitty Gritty White. It's a fantastic variety. It just blooms like crazy. And then we have Cape May, I believe, in the Seaside Serenade. Could be Cape Lookout, actually. Cape Lookout in the Seaside Serenade collection, which actually is my personal favorite. It has this really nice hint of blush as well. Not pure white, but it does. It is very much white at certain parts of the year.
Perfect. That makes sense. So one of the other questions that we had too was about Zespo Lollipop, wondering how long it takes that particular grape to mature.
So it should take about, when you buy your Zestfuls in the garden center, they will be of age to fruit that year.
Perfect. So they take them home and plant them. They potentially could have fruit. That's great to know.
Yeah.
So Katie, this next one is for you. What is the best place for people to learn about plants that are right for their area of the country?
Oh, well, there's actually, the good thing is there are many sources. So I would start with your local garden center. If you've got, if you're lucky enough to have one close by, I would develop a relationship with them so that you know about new plants coming in, join their newsletter. They are really local, local experts. I think a lot of newspapers that used to have local, regional gardening coverage, some of them still do, but you can also find some of those experts on, in a Facebook group, on social media. You might join your local club online. You might also consult, master gardeners. You might look to, regional websites that are cropping up. I think that in the last 2 years, there's been such an interest in, gardening and plants that there are a lot more sources than there used to be, frankly. So, but I would start with, check out Facebook. It's a surprising resource for local gardening groups. And then your local garden center. I just can't say enough about how they should really be one of the first places you turn to find out about new plants.
I agree. They're a great resource. We had lots of questions about people asking about specifics for zones, or does it tolerate different types of soils or things like that? So one of the things that I use for this is to go on Monrovia.com, and if you can sort and search by different plant attributes, and it makes it really, really easy. So that's a great opportunity too. One of the other questions that we got a lot of were, where can I access this information after today? So we will have it on YouTube, on Monrovia's YouTube channel very soon. Just give us a little time to make sure that everything is good, and we'll pop it up there and you can use it as a resource. Lots of, oh, go ahead.
Oh, the other thing I would add to that is that we are going to have a quiz that just kind of a fun quiz that you can take on our website to help you figure out what your style may be. And that will lead you to some articles that we have on our blog. And if you go to monrovia.com and you look under the Be Inspired Garden Design tool, you can see a lot of articles to help you with the style part of what we're saying. And what you said, Kathleen, too, about figuring out, based on your soil type or your zone. If you're on monrovia.com and you look on Plant Finder, just by answering a few key questions about what you're looking for, you'll be able to filter down our list of plants to something that will grow in your area and suit whatever your landscaping need is.
Great point. So Georgia, we have a couple more plant specific questions for you. I'm trying not to stump you, trust me. One
play Stump Georgia.
We definitely will have to play Stump Georgia someday. But,
oh my.
So this question, they asked about growing some of the vines that you talked about, specifically Heavenly Ascent. Could it be grown as a ground trailer as opposed to, does it have to be trellised and grow up?
I've never seen it done that way, but I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do it. I know people do that with all sorts of different vines, and if you have the right spot, I think that you could probably make it work as well. It's pretty vigorous, and so I think it could fill in as a ground cover pretty nicely.
Great, excellent. So maybe both of you could weigh on this last question. Lots of companion plant questions, but a couple specifically to rhododendrons. Can you recommend a couple of good flowering companions for rhododendrons?
Now you're stumping Katie.
I'm trying to. We'll play that game too.
Well, there's a article that we have on our website that talks exactly about this, but I'm trying to think of what comes to mind immediately. And it kind of depends on where you are, because rhododendrons certainly grow in many places. Mm-hmm. Georgia?
I used to landscape all through college, and there was one of my favorite gardens was a rhododendron garden, and it had all sorts of different hostas. And I know hostas aren't quite, you grow them more for the foliage rather than the flowers, but I've always thought that was a really lovely pairing. Mm-hmm. But that's not a flower, so I think I cheated.
Excellent. Well, that is about all of the questions that we have time for today. Let me just do another quick little check. But like I said, we do have a lot of specific questions, and we'll do kind of a rapid fire question and answer session with both Katie and Georgia and have that for you at a later time. So thank you again to everybody for joining us. Please make sure that you have a wonderful opportunity to get information on monrovia.com and at your local garden center, and enjoy your spring planting season. Thanks, guys.
No, great to have you all here. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to having another webinar as we get into spring.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.